that's another pain in the ass, honestly, with the studio going in the direction that it did. Just too many producers, too many managers, too many hands in the pot, and just like, that hurts the game. I know the intention is to make things more efficient, but it's, in my opinion, actually makes it worse. Um, so if I was ever to get back into game development again, I would just kind of, I would probably join a smaller team, you know. That's one of the things I loved about early on, is that because it was a smaller team and it was these huge games, I got to touch on everything. I got to be a character artist, environment artist, a designer, you know, in some small ways a programmer. I didn't know how to code necessarily, but I'd be there with programmers, literally sit with them for hours working systems out, testing back and forth. I would sketch stuff out interface wise and say, hey, this is what I need. And I need this to connect to this and blah 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 blah. And it allowed me to really, I'm very technical. I do art, but I'm very technical. I like to problem solve. So early on, I got to do that. And then by the time Starfield came around, you just can't get anything into the game with like five other people doing it with you. Before you could, now you can't. So you need a tech artist, and you need this, and you need code support, and it's just like, so it's very hard to be a ninja. We had a big ninja culture back in Skyrim and Fallout 4, and then we just kind of vanished hard. By the time 76 got there, it's just another very limited position. I was just back to kind of character artist. Like, well, that's not, it's not passionate anymore.
Yeah, because there were, I think it was what, 500 people, I think, that worked on Starfield. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
even want to guess how many people were
yeah, yeah.
working on Outer Scrolls 6. Probably be more than
Yeah,
that
no, it was,
now.
yeah, no, I mean, it was well over 500.
That's
Well
crazy
over 500
numbers.
for sure. Yeah, and when I think about those numbers, because it was like 115 for Fallout, and I'm just like, it just blows my mind, and
That's a massive jump.
um, yeah, huge jump. And then you got to imagine that uh, it does, you have limited resources financially. So how do you pay? How do you pay bonuses? How do you do this? Like, you limit those things financially now from a huge standpoint, and you have people who, you know, people are like, oh, making games. What are you complaining about? It's easy, whatever. I'm not complaining. I wouldn't complain. I think it was a great job. I think it is a lot harder than anybody can imagine until you're actually doing it. You know, you are constantly trying to meet so many bars, artistic, technical, design, all of these things you're trying to basically keep up with. And you're trying to do it with a big team of people. And the bigger the team gets, you can find somehow, it's like you get diminishing returns, you know?
Yeah.
So you're putting in all this time and effort, and you're not compensated for anymore. So by the time you actually work out what you are making per hour, you know, versus the time you spent, you hear the salary, you're like, oh wow, that's a pretty good salary. But by the time you work out what you're working per hour, it's very low, because you're staying there overnight. You're staying away from your family. You're doing all these things. I know because I did it. I had a sofa in my cubicle and I'd sleep there, trying to get stuff in and done. Um, so I think that, you kind of forces you to put some things into perspective. And
The culture was really good for a while. I haven't been there for a while, so I can't speak to the culture now. I know it's changed some. Um, but we all had a kitchen that we all ate lunch at together. We knew the chef, we knew the woman calling our names out when our food was ready. There's a lot of team building, a lot of community building, and I think that played a huge hand into people staying for a while. I think it was
mm,
also the kind of place where, unfortunately, I think you can also, once you got there, you could kind of relax and not have to work that hard to keep your job. They don't fire people easily. I think maybe they're leery of getting sued or something like that, but it's very hard to get fired, I think, at Bethesda. And so I think there was if you're not working that hard, but you're putting in your hours, you could just kind of do that forever. And I think that has resulted a little bit in like some people who maybe, well, I won't go that far. I just think it's very easy to go there and kind of cruise because you're not going to lose your job. Um, and
There'd be
so
like that. There'd be people like that at any company, I think.
any company,
Yeah,
any
yeah,
company,
yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's a tale of as old as time. It's just, it's human nature.
yeah.
But I think I think there's some people, especially of the younger generation of at the time, who I think worked really hard and poured their souls into the game, but weren't necessarily recognized or lauded over kind of everyone else to the degree where I think there was a feeling of like, I think a lot of people who were kind of really pushing for change and for revolutionizing things and always moving forward, there wasn't, I don't know that people felt very supported in that environment. And so some of those people moved on, and the people who didn't have to put in all that time and just kind of get their head down, they could just stay. And so listen, what I'm saying is a broad and rather ugly generalization. You know, it's verging on slanderous, you know, and so I apologize in advance for like kind of coming off, you know, that way. But you know, when you're in a company, any organization, and you feel changes happening and you're not happy with how kind of, you know, things are being handled in some respects, you kind of build up these small grudges, these kind of, you start to see the bad patterns and things. And so if you're hearing negativity in my voice, it simply comes from the fact of just working there for years and not being entirely happy with how certain things were getting managed. And yeah, and you know, a lot of my colleagues have left since then, you know, and I think there is so much potential at that game studio, and there's a lot of new hires there who are young and hungry and amazing dreamers, and I really look forward to seeing what they do with Elder Scrolls 6. I really cannot wait.
It's still a long way away.
It's still a long way away, exactly. And I think there's just a lot of people there who I remember who like didn't work that hard, who are just still there, you know, and who will never leave.
Bethesda was a bit more compartmentalized, a bit more structured, where it was like you're going to be doing level design or you're going to be doing art. Now you could do the level art, like you could place, like you are welcome to go in and place things, but I think in the earlier days of Bethesda, when it was a lot smaller, you had that freedom to kind of do one thing and then another. But
Yeah,
as it grew, I mean, and it's not a knock on the studio. It's just it's like how do you keep something like that on the rails? It requires more organization, and so there is unfortunately some pigeonholing that comes with that.
Because Bethesda as a studio culture was very good at acknowledging other people's work. I don't think I can ever think of a time when somebody claimed credit for someone else's work. And in fact, they'd go out of the way to say, oh yeah, and this was so-and-so's idea, or, you know, I'm dovetailing off of what this other person did. And up until, I'm going to say 5 years ago, since I'm not an HR guy, I don't have the exact metrics, but it's going to be roughly in there. The retention rate was staggeringly high. And in fact, it became an internal problem because when nobody leaves, there's no upward mobility.
No promotions.
Yeah, there's no place to go to. You know, a certain amount of turnover is actually necessary for that to happen, and it just wasn't happening. People were staying there for, you know, decades. You know, I've got a 15-year one of those plexiglass 15-year things up on my table up there, and there's a whole slew of them out there. There's a lot of people who've been with the company 10, 15, 20 years. It's a staggering achievement.
You know, because you're going so much, you've got some blinders on and things are kind of hitting you out of nowhere. You think you've got a handle on it and then you don't. But that doesn't mean that people aren't making good, honest attempts to deal with the problem. One of like a small thing that I started doing was instead of sitting down one-on-one to go over the tool set with whoever asked, I would just record videos anytime anyone had a question and I would send them the video. But then I would also publish that internally, and therefore everyone who had that question could see it. And that was because that was the only way to manage the scale problem. I was being inundated with requests. I didn't know when someone would need something, especially they might not be awake when I'm awake because of the time zone differences. So having a published video tutorial was the easiest way to transmit the most information in the shortest amount of time, so that I could get everything across to whoever needed it. And, you know, the amount of requests I would get that I would have to manage personally would go down. So there were definitely a lot of tactics for how to manage the problem. I think it's more of that on the strategic level. We weren't aware of what were the big trends that were hitting us as an organization, and how do you manage that, at a much higher level. That was the part that I think took a lot of us by surprise, because you're just trying to you think you're playing the same game you were playing 4 years ago, 10 years ago, and you're just trying to manage things as best you can. But no, things have changed fundamentally because the organization has grown past these certain points. The industry is changing, the audience is changing, et cetera. And it can really take you by surprise if you're not careful.
I always felt encouraged to sort of Wild West a little bit. Like, as long as you got your regularly tasked work done, like it was okay if you like were doing extra stuff and had like a little bit of side action that you were excited about, just to keep it fresh because you're working on the same things day in and day out. So that was that was very much encouraged. I think that's what you're referring to with the ninja culture thing. And that was awesome for Skyrim, and to a large degree for Fallout 4. It was that way too. Wasn't it until we started to grow, like a lot of the sort of management and production methodologies like that we had as a studio that, in my opinion, work really well. They don't scale, right? They don't scale well when you have a 200, 300, 400. I don't even know what the actual dev size ended at with Starfield. I'm not sure. Somewhere between 400 or 500. And then you do sort of get, you talk about like siloing. I mean, the thing to think about too is like we weren't all in the same building either. We had, for Skyrim so for like Skyrim, we all worked together. Like you knew everybody. And then largely for Fallout, it was largely the same. We did have a little bit of external work, but on Starfield, and I think Perky mentioned it on 76 too. We absorbed an entire team from Bethesda Austin. They had their own studio that was already there. It was Battlecry, I think, at the time. And so you're absorbing an entire team that has their own culture. They have their own game. So the siloing kind of geographically happens, but also just culturally it happens too.